You know, one of the reasons that we do these things so in depth has to do with what I expect you to get out of the teaching. And I expect you to get 4 things. After hearing an extended teaching, I want you to be able to, of course, I want you to understand the material. I want you to understand it so that you know it, so that you can do it. Okay, so step 1, I want you to understand it. Step 2, I want you to be able to do it so that you know all the things necessary so that you could actually be encouraged to start walking it out. I want these teachings to be things that you can walk out. And then, of course, the third thing is I want you then to be able to defend what you're doing. So I want you to understand it. I want you to do it. I want you to be able to defend it. And then the last piece is I'd like you to be able to teach it. But first, let's just review real quickly what we've covered here so far. We're talking about, in the teaching No Other Name, that the name is about the authority. It's about the reputation of the person. Their name is their authority. The name is their reputation. The name has to do also with possession or belonging to. If you have somebody's name or you bear their name, there's a certain amount of that you belong to them. It has to do with lineage to a certain degree. And so when we claim to be children of the living Elohim, we're talking about we belong to Him. We're claiming His name upon us. See, if I adopt you as my child and then you take my name upon you, you are now letting the world know that you belong to me. You're a part of this family. And so name has to do with all of these different things. He says, if you can have that faith that Yeshua is the Mashiach. But then you have to know what Mashiach is. What is the Messiah supposed to do? He's supposed to regather the lost tribes of Israel. He's supposed to redeem everyone back to Himself. He's bringing and restoring people back into covenant. He's bringing them back into a wedding after they had basically broken covenant by committing adultery. And then they were scattered and punished for that. He's going to bring everything back to restoration to where it was supposed to be. And you can't possibly get there by doing away with the covenant document or the ketubah known as the Torah. The Torah is the wedding document. That's what we're told in Exodus 31, that the Sabbath is like the wedding ring. It is a sign between me and my people, me and the children of Israel forever. It's like the wedding ring. The forgiveness of trespasses. I love that word better than sin in this case, just because I like the idea that trespassing means that you went somewhere you weren't supposed to go. You stepped outside of boundaries that you were supposed to stay inside of, and stepped across a boundary into some place you didn't belong. I like trespasses. See, you have these nice fences around your life called the Torah that are supposed to keep you safe and encompassed in His will. But when you step outside of that, you're trespassing. You're trespassing in some place you don't belong. Also, if you bring something into His house that doesn't belong, you're trespassing. Because you see, to be in His house, you need to be in teshuvah, in repentance, you need to be in good standing with Him. And when you come and bring worldly things into His house, now you're trespassing because you don't belong in His house. He says, which He wrought in the Messiah when He raised Him from the dead and seated Him at the right hand in the heavenlies, far above all rule and authority and power and majesty, and every name that is named, not only in this age, but also in that age which is to come. Okay, so now let's stop right there. So He made Messiah higher than every reputation, every authority, every identity. You understand what I'm saying now? It's not just because His name is so special, the actual pronunciation, or somehow Yeshua, okay, or Yahusha, or whatever way you pronounce it. It's not about that. It's about identifying Him as who He is. He has been, everything that He is has been placed above every other authority, reputation that there is. You know, those last 2 verses, He put all under His feet and gave Him to be head over all to the assembly, which is His body. So the assembly is supposed to be His body. Okay? Well, let's see. If He's perfect and He kept Torah perfectly, so if you're part of His body and you're sinning, that's a dysfunctional part of His body. That's like a cancer in His body. It needs to be exorcised out. And I don't mean like through exorcism. I mean it needs to be taken out and removed from the body. Otherwise, it may hurt and kill the body. So hopefully we're understanding that. Could you imagine having like your right hand, but your right hand decides it doesn't want to be a right hand. It wants to do whatever it wants. And so when you go to pick something up, it goes in a whole different direction. That's just not going to work. Or what if your hand started slapping you? People might find it entertaining and laugh like you just did, but it could get a little upsetting and annoying after a while, wouldn't it? And that's essentially what we're doing. We're like a right hand that's slapping him when we're sinning. Maybe that's a good image for you to kind of put in your head, to picture that when you're sinning, you're like being his right hand slapping him in the face. We're all looking to be exalted in some way. We're looking to be changed from the corruptible into incorruptible. There's a certain exaltation there. We're looking to be given certain authority because we're told, like the apostles were told, you're going to be sitting on the 12 thrones judging the 12 tribes. Well, that's only if you're going to go through this whole process here. And so are you going to go through the process so that you can, you know what? We read these verses like that where you have a destiny to be kings and priests. That's kind of an exalted position. But why do we think we're going to get exalted to be a king or a priest unless we're going to go through this process of being humbled, emptying ourselves, being humbled, and being obedient unto death, so that he can then what? Highly or exalt or raise you up. So that that's when he can exalt you and raise you up. He gets to point the finger at you and say, well done, you good and faithful servant. He gets to tell you, this is my son or daughter in whom I'm well proud. He gets, not you, you get to claim all these things on yourself. He's got to do all that. Continuing in verse 14 says, do all matters without grumblings and disputings, in order that you be blameless and faultless, children of Elohim without blemish, in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world. Now, by the way, none of that works if you're going to sit there and do the nonsense that I see people doing online. You are not shining as a light to the world when you're making an embarrassment of yourself, arguing with other brethren and calling each other names and trying to prove how stupid the other guy is and how smart you are. He says, stop. First of all, let's stop with the grumbling. Oh, we all grumble and whine and complain. That's not fair. Well, I don't like that. Why do I have to do that? Why can't it be this way? Blah, blah. Stop grumbling. We have to stop grumbling. And then there's disputings. He's not talking about disputing with the world. He's saying when you dispute with each other, you're acting like the world. Let's stop fighting with each other. You know, in Titus 3, he says that arguing and fighting over genealogies and Torah and Scripture is basically unprofitable and useless. It's Titus 3:9. But then in verse 10, he says, but the divisive person's the problem. Make sure we get divisive people out of the midst of the group so that divisive people are not causing issues. Don't be that divisive person. Oh, but you don't understand. That person was wrong and I had to set him straight. No, you don't. Why do you think it's your job to set everybody straight? Do you like it when people try to set you straight? You know what? Let the teachers do it from the microphone and let Abba convict them when they hear the teaching. Let Abba lead them to a teaching. Let the Abba convict them through whatever means he decides to do it. You do not necessarily get to be the instrument of that conviction. So did we understand in Philippians, just to go back there for a second, that that's why every knee would bow, that he would have the name of that? That goes back to what we read in Ephesians, right? In Ephesians, we talked about how he would be given a name or authority above all names. But because he was willing to empty himself, because he was willing to do all those things, that's why his reputation and name would be above every name, that every knee would bow to him and his authority. We're not bowing to a name. That's like in America pledging allegiance to a flag. Who came up with that stupidity? Why would you pledge allegiance to an inanimate object? Well, because it comes out of paganism where they bow down to idols. Okay, so why are we pledging allegiance to a flag? The point is, he is given an authority and we bow to authority. We bow to his identity, to who he is. We're bowing to him because he's king, not because of a name. He's given an authority, a reputation, an identity above every other one, and so all knees shall bow to him. Does that make sense now? Do you see how this whole name teaching is flowing right into all these verses? So look at what's going on here. You're going through a trial. You're going through sufferings. Remember that sometimes you may suffer and it has nothing to do with you being in the wrong place. You didn't do anything wrong. You're just suffering for his sake. Because why? Because you claim to be a part of his authority. You claim to be under his authority. You claim to be part of his identity. You claim to be possessed or belonging to him. And so you may share in his suffering as well. Don't you remember when Messiah Yeshua was taken to his trial. There were those that walked around and said to, like Peter got, oh, you were with him, weren't you? And what was he afraid of? He was afraid, oh, I might suffer with him because I'm now connected to him. We call that guilt by association. Guess what? You may suffer what's called guilt by association with people that don't understand Mashiach and don't understand what you're doing. It's judgment when I see somebody doing something that I realize I should not be a part of, and then I walk away from it. It's judging if I look and I go, oh, that person's a lousy, awful sinner, and start telling other people the same thing. Now I've judged them. I can use judgment to just say, I don't know why they're doing what they're doing. I just know I shouldn't be a part of it. So I'm not going to judge why they're doing it or how they're blinded or what their background is, or maybe they just don't know any better. And so, but I'm going to use judgment to realize I shouldn't be a part of it. You see the difference? Because but for Yahweh, you might be them. As a matter of fact, you probably were them at one point, because the ones we tend to judge the hardest are the ones that were like the way we were. That we have to stop this Gnostic sort of need to understand and know everything about the Godhead. Here's John. I don't know what level of hubris you have or pride and ego you have, but I personally don't think that I will ever understand Messiah better than John. How could any of us claim that when he lived with him? Okay? So if John is going to say, hey, I don't truly get it, except that I know that we'll see him as he is, and then we'll know that what he's like because we'll be like him, and then because we're like him, we'll see him as he is. In other words, when we are changed from this corruptible to the incorruptible, we'll now be like him in type of the same substance, and then we will see him like he is because we can't see him like he is in the flesh. The corruptible can't see that incorruptible and fully understand what he's like. I've used the analogy, it's like an amoeba trying to understand a human being. Okay? We as an amoeba cannot understand a human being if we were an amoeba. You're a single-celled thing trying to understand a billion-celled thing. How do you understand that? But if we took that amoeba and turned it into a human being, guess what it would understand? It would understand what it's like to be a human being. So here's John. So let's just embrace that the more we want to struggle with people understanding the nature of the Godhead and what Elohim is and how could he always exist and how can there be nothing, all these, we'll understand it when we're changed to be like him. That's what John says. By this we know, we have known love because he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers. And I'm not seeing this in the body. I'm seeing a lot of anger and bitterness and attacking. I'm not seeing a lot of love. Oh, but you don't understand. They keep a different calendar, and so what? Stop that. If you cannot talk about that in love, then don't do it. That's a rule, by the way, we have at our Sukkots, where if you can't talk about a doctrinal issue and stay and maintain your fruit of the Spirit, then you are not allowed to do it.